Grid Kids.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 8th episode of Grid Kids. I'm your host as always, Nicholas Semrad, and before we dive deep into this month's interview, I'd like to celebrate a little good news with you all. We now have an official sponsor for the Grid Kids podcast, Spectrasonics. Spectrasonics is the creator of Keyscape, Trillion, Omnisphere, and Stylus RMX software programs, and honestly, they've changed my mind about music software in general. As some of you probably know, I've never really been much of a software guy per se. But once I got these programs and saw not only how easy they were to use, but heard how insanely good they sound, it almost completely changed the way that I approach recording and production. So here's a big thank you to those guys, and whenever you get a chance, head over to spectrasonics.net and check out their software for yourself. For this month's interview, I got to dive deep into the mind of someone that I've been not only listening to and learning from since the early days of my interest in improvised music, but now I've toured with and become close friends with. I often use recordings that he's done when I teach rhythm study, and I personally feel like he's one of the best, if not the best, drummer in the world. This month's interview is with Mark Guiliana. For the few folks out there that may not have heard of Mark, he's toured with and played on records with Brad Mehldau, John Scofield, Avishai Cohen, Matisyahu, and his wife and incredible jazz artist Gretchen Parlato. Mark was also the drummer and driving force behind David Bowie's final record, Black Star, and he recently released his newest record from his electronic project, Beat Music. Here's a clip from the album entitled Beat Music, Beat Music, Beat Music from a song called Human. And now, here's my interview with Mark Guiliana. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here with the one, the only Mark Guiliana. Hi, Mark.
What's up, Nick?
I'm, as I tend to get at your house, I'm planning on, in about 5 minutes, being violently caffeinated.
Good. So we can just fast forward to that. If you're listening, you can just fast forward a bit. Enjoy that.
It'll take me a few minutes. But yeah, the last few times I've left here, I've had to hold my arm while I drive. Hold my own arm with my other arm. It's like quite the the technique hang. We just got back. Well, you just got back from newer stuff. You were doing the trio hang with Avishai Cohen up in New York, and Mr. Shy Maestro on piano. And you guys just did like 2 nights at the Blue Note, right?
4 nights.
4 nights at the Blue Note, killing.
Yes.
And you're doing the Gently Disturbed record.
Exactly. Yeah, a couple newer things in the mix, but yeah, it was a trip. We played 1 gig last year in London, and that was the first one since 2008.
Oh shit! So it's been a while.
Yeah.
Killing.
So it's a very unique experience to play music that you played so much and then didn't touch for 10 years to revisit it as a trip.
Well, especially too, because you've been like genre-wise, you've been kind of everywhere since then. I mean, you were everywhere before then, but like especially since then, it's like, let's go do this fucking shit and then this shit and this shit. Like,
yeah, I think I always thought that way, but more recently I've had the actual opportunities to, publicly express those interests.
that is killing. It was something I was going to bring up because I'm always curious about a trend that I've seen, and maybe it's my tastes coming into what I notice, which makes sense. But I've noticed that a lot of the people who are kind of on the forefront of, I say the jazz scene in the broadest of ways, but you know what I mean. That a lot of that hang comes from like a really serious like rock background. Like, especially lately, it's like, I think of you and McCaslin and a bunch of people in that scene just being very versed in rock things. And you grew up kind of with the grunge scene in play, right? That was your hang.
Absolutely.
It was like the Pearl Jam, Soundgarden vibe.
Nirvana, yeah.
Yeah. And, how it took you a while. You did that for a few years before you got into jazz, right? You didn't just start right away.
Right. Yeah.
How do you notice that comes into play? Maybe this is too broad of a question, but like, where do you try and tie those together?
My favorite versions of those things living together are the times where it was the last thing I was thinking about, or there was effort to join them. I think there have been many, 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 many times in the past where I've very consciously tried to marry two things, and even if it works, you might still hear it, or in the intention, it's a bit more, oh, he's trying to do this and this, and because in my mind, not to sound cliche, but in my mind, everything really is the same. It's all just one big collection of stuff that makes me feel great, So like an influence for me in its most basic form is just simply that, like, whoa, this does something to my body.
Okay.
That is the requirement for something to count as an influence, Yeah. So like Tony Williams, when I listen to Tony Williams play, that does a certain thing to my body. And then when I listen to Aphex Twin, that does a certain thing to my body. Sure. When I listen to Nirvana, that does, and that feeling is very, very similar, the feeling in my body. So although the input is different, if you really want to worry about the details, yes, there are differences in the input, but the result inside my body is the same. So all those things live in the same place. So when I'm playing, my favorite musical moments happen when I'm just reaching for stuff from that place. Yeah. And not worried so much about what it is or where it came from. So yeah, like in high school, I was just playing along to Red Hot Chili Peppers records all day, and Soundgarden and stuff like that. And then I went to school for jazz, William Patterson in Jersey, which was amazing. But I had all these rules. I thought I wasn't allowed to use any of those influences. It's like when I'm playing jazz, I'm only allowed to use my jazz influences. Sure. So I didn't realize it in the moment, but obviously I'm just, I'm using 30% of what I love about music, or whatever the percentages are. And then it wasn't until I started going to New York a lot to hear music, and it was mostly the avant-garde scene. And the first guy really in particular was Jim Black, really one of my favorite drummers, my favorite musicians. And, I would go to Tonic and I'm hearing him playing maybe even a completely improvised gig. But there are moments where it's just completely Dave Grohl. Or there's moments where it's Jack DeJohnette. Or there's moments where it's, I don't know, just not even drums, So it's like, but particularly that rock influence, I heard coming through those guys. And I was like, yeah, of course, all this stuff is, if it's presented in a really musical way that's specific to that moment, that's all anyone can expect or wish for,
But I feel like that the moment that you're speaking about is the trickiest thing to kind of iron down, because it seems like, and I'm speaking on slightly personal experience from this, but it seems like there's some sort of a preparation difference, I think, between your whatever you would consider like prototype jazz drummer and prototype rock guy, and there's a lot of things. Like I remember back when I was studying with this drummer, Dana Murray, he was talking about how like when he was hearing Radiohead, which Philip Selway, I think is the name of the drummer, when he would hear that, he's like, you're hearing something that is like very unprepared, very like unschooled sounding. And he's like, honestly, if you put a Bernard Purdy in that spot, it's not as cool, so there's a weird thing that happens. I don't necessarily know where this started, but where I think people who are in the jazz hang try to approach the rock thing like educationally. And I think you touched on something really important, that it's like, it's not really, it's much more of almost like a metaphysical experience that it takes to like make it honest. Because I feel like, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you can hear if someone is trying to play rock drums. You know, like if a jazz guy is coming into the situation being like, I'm going to play this like a rock guy would play it, rather than just like trying to feel like a rock guy would feel.
Yeah, and that's interesting when you mention the academic approach, because quite often the first thing someone plays on the drum set is like a rock beat, because it's somewhat the most achievable in the shortest amount of time. It's tricky. I mean, so much what you're talking about is the brain, you know, and the brain can only get you so far, you know. All the music I love is, you know, the brain comes in handy, but it's coming from the gut, you know? Yeah. Even the most sophisticated music, my favorite versions of it are coming from the gut, you know?
Well, and I feel like some of that too comes from situations that are taking the brain out of the equation. You know, you can go both the unhealthy and the healthy ways. It's like you have people who are doing it the wrong ways of like, I'm going to get super into drugs and get all fucked up. And they, you know, those guys are all gut because they can't think anything. And then you get the really like the Herbies and the people who are like so beyond what the brain is giving them, to where it's like, this is nothing but feeling because I'm choosing it to be that.
Precisely. And the way you always talk about voicings and your commitment to that, like just harmony and shit, that is way over my head. I mean, the most important thing is that you are using it as an expression. And drums too, all this coordination, all this stuff. Unfortunately, it takes this massive commitment to practicing the instrument to get to a place where you can express. But so many times in that pursuit, people get stuck and obsessive about what it's taking, that, you know, the practicing, and that it's really difficult to come out the other side, you know?
Yeah. I'm going to use this as an example to bitch about schools, because I do about once a podcast, but this one will be short. I think people underestimate the value of life and, you know, really, really seeing what like an ability to harness experience does to someone's playing. You know, I mean, there's a reason why like heavy music heads will still listen to the blues and listen to like those old cats. Like, to a certain extent, you could make an argument that they knew nothing about the instrument, but they knew everything about the instrument. It's like they knew every, like, here's this emotion, here's this one, here's this one, here's one emotion for 45 minutes. You're going to care about it the whole time because it's really fucking real. And like, you know, there's no real way other than to be cognizant of that fact to like instruct someone on that. You know, you can't say like, here's how to play Love, or here's how to play like, you know, like, yeah, you know, which I'm sure has been done. I'm sure there's some sort of like, here's the sadness scale. Yeah, right. You know, and yeah, I just, you know, I feel like it's really important for musicians to know that like you should go out and get your ass kicked and go out and fall in love and go out and like gamble on some shit, you know, like just do whatever you need to do to like experience the full gamut, because that's the only way that you're going to like experiencing those things is the only chance you have at knowing how to get them through your fingers or through your feet onto the instrument that you're playing. Like there's no other way, I don't think.
Yeah. And I think the next step, which is kind of mystical, is like, okay, so I got dumped and I'm practicing my scales every day, but they have nothing to do with each other. You know, really. Yeah. So that kind of that invisible, wait, how do they come together, and how does the emotion really seamlessly get into the technical aspect? And that is, you know, I'm sure we all have our own version of that happening, but it's a lot of trust, it's a lot of patience, it's a lot of long game, but most importantly, allowing the things that are unique to you to be present while you're playing, whether musically or not, you know, and that's hard. Yeah. You know, especially for hardship. Say you get dumped and you're wrecked. You're like, oh, but cool, I have this cool gig tomorrow night. I could forget about it. It's like my escape from it, which is cool, which music can certainly serve as a powerful escape from real life.
Sure.
But the ultimate goal is to not escape the thing when you go play your music. Is like to play, you have to get through it to get to the music.
Yeah. There was a girl I dated in high school. Her
Shout out.
Shout out to Megan Broheimer. And I remember we had some messy experience, and my whole thing was just like, oh, I had never really thought about the emotional part of music. I'm sure I had, done it unwillingly because I'd been playing for a minute at that point. But I think I had some gig that she was at, and it was like the first gig after the hang had gotten dark. And I just remember like, oh man, my solo is coming up. I need to find a way to get her with this solo. And like, as corny as that sounds, that was my first memory of like, oh yeah, like you can go past the tune. Like this is about more than the tune. It's a very surface level version of that, I think, not very mature of one, but just being able to say like, oh, I can play this emotion. I don't think it worked. I think she ended up still dumping me.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah. I was going to ask you like, and this is kind of in the same hang, but when you were, getting into all these genres, and I know this answer kind of changes as per the musician I'm talking to, but like, what are your opinions on like isolating yourself genre wise, like while you're working on something, because I'm sure there's a certain aspect of like, oh, when you first fell in love with jazz, it's like, oh fuck, I'm so in love with this. Let me just do that. Like, were you ever like cognizant of, oh, I need to be just doing this shedding of this thing and like really surrounding myself with it? Or was it all kind of like a natural, like, oh, I just love this new thing I'm into, I'm just going to do that?
It was mostly natural, but yeah, I mean, when I got into jazz, I was like 18 or something. So it's the perfect time to kind of rabbit hole something, because I didn't need to, I wasn't really playing gigs yet and like in real life situations. So I think it's dangerous to do that when you do have to also be like this working guy or girl who's playing a bunch of different music every night. And there's something about the drums, like the drum set was invented to accommodate playing jazz. Like the drum set is 100 years old ish. And the individual elements existed forever, but the true creation of the trap kit was for jazz. So there's a certain, I feel like, a responsibility to like, okay, if I'm going to give my life to this instrument, I should do my homework and like really check that out. How is this thing being used? And also like on an academic tip, with the coordination stuff and just jazz drumming in general is like, you can tick a lot of boxes by like, if I really investigate into in this world, like I'm kind of learning a lot of stuff about the instrument inside of a style without having to just work on like technique in a vacuum, So that was my moment of jazz, but still, I'm still like going home and just listening to Soundgarden. I'm like driving around the neighborhood with the windows down with, Nirvana or something. So it's still like, well, that's me.
Yeah. You said two things I want to touch on there, which I think both are really interesting and married to things I've been going into lately. Do you think there are musts for an instrument? Like, for instance, you mentioned like drums, like, okay, jazz is the thing that the trap set was invented for. Like, I should know this. And I hear people say that about piano. Those instructions make me nervous. I see their utility, but they make me nervous. And the reason they make me nervous is because most of the cats who I think have changed the game, I feel like have done things that are so beyond the scope of what the instrument was supposed to do that I'm always like, I don't know. There's got to be a way to marry those two things, and I'm not totally sure how to do it.
Yeah, good. This is good. I think it's not a must. The reason I did it is because I was energized by it. You know, I think the must is joy.
Okay.
The must is like fucking euphoric vibrations, because that's the only thing. Without that, you're not going to keep going back to your instrument, you know? And if you don't keep going back to your instrument, you're not going to develop the relationship you need to develop with it to then be expressive.
And have the hours.
You know? So the must is the joy. And whatever situation provides that joy is home for that time being, you know? So for me, it happened to be jazz, and and jazz happened to be the history, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But some of my favorite musicians, some of my favorite drummers have never sniffed jazz in their
I would love
musical
to hear
life.
Dave Grohl play swing.
Yeah. Or not, you know? Like the thing about Dave Grohl, I don't wish for him to play one note different than he's ever played.
Sure. Yeah.
It's just the truth, you know? It's like, that's it. I don't, you know, just keep doing that, you know?
Yeah.
And if he wants to do something else, I trust him, because if he really wants to, it will be approached with that same Dave Grohl spirit.
Yeah.
You know?
Just because he's proved his, like, I do this out of love first.
Yeah. I think the musts are genreless.
Okay.
The musts are just have a great sound on your instrument, you know, have a true unique relationship from you to the instrument that no one else has, because they are not you, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like a little more cliche to say, like, find your own voice, which is cool. But I think if you think about it more as like your own relationship with the instrument, that feels a little more attainable than like, this is my own voice and no one else's, you know?
Yeah.
But if you think about it as a relationship, you know, your relationship with your significant other or with your brother or sister or this or that, it's like, oh yeah, this is absolutely unique between this person and myself, or, you know? And then, you know, you can like, you can amplify that uniqueness when the time is appropriate, you know. But it's definitely the musts are just the fundamentals, you know. Hey, play with a really good feeling, have a great sound, be able to play with cool dynamics, listen, you know, those kinds of things. So definitely.
You also mentioned, and this is another thing that I've actually been. I think I just taught in a lesson this morning, is just the technique in a vacuum thing is like, I've heard from, I think, and I love all my students, so I definitely don't mean to call any of you people out, but I'm going to anyway. I've heard a bunch of people lately say, oh, I'm trying to get better at this. I'm working on my scales, working on my arpeggios. And then I personally start thinking about, like, what's the last scale I played in a song? And I can't think of one. And there's actually scales that I think I would probably, if you asked me, like, how would you finger the scale, I would actually have to slow down and like think about it. You know, like what are your, do you, I guess the question would be, do you think there are technique things that are so vital that it's important to rip them away from the music? Or do you think you can kind of get everything through tunes and through playing along? And like, what would be the stuff you would instruct someone that's past a beginner level, to kind of say, like, okay, these techniques are important. Do this first, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's been helpful for me to do certain things in a vacuum so that I am not tempted to use them in the exact way that I'm practicing them.
Okay. That's really good. That's
right?
really good.
So if you make it so clear to yourself while you're practicing something, you're like, wow, you know, D Phrygian scale, quarter notes, octaves at quarter note equals, 65. Wow, I am practicing right now. Holy shit. Nowhere in your mind would you say, I can't wait to use this on the gig, But when you work on things that might be quote unquote cool, or like, oh damn, this is kind of slick, then you're going to be that much more tempted to use it in this same way, and to use the stuff you're practicing in the way that you're practicing it, well, I'm speaking as an improviser, right?
Yeah.
Is not cool. That's not how it goes. You know, I mean, you know, I love to improvise. So, you know, I'm afraid to get too attached to anything in my practicing because I'll be tempted to use it. So if I'm just working on eighth notes on the pad at quarter note equals 40, I know I'm not going to play that as is on the gig, but I know it's going to help me.
Yeah.
It's going to help some other stuff happen. So it's more just like not trusting myself to, you know, not get too attached to certain things.
Yeah.
And because I want to make a statement unique to that moment, or at least give myself the best chance to do so.
Yeah.
Quick little anecdote. I remember hearing Wayne Shorter talk about improvising. And Wayne Shorter, who's from New Jersey, which is very important.
Keyboard player, right?
He is a saxophone player.
Yeah.
And if you think of him, no, I'm wrong. He's just a really important human. Happens to play saxophone. Anyway, so he was talking about improvising as entering the unknown. And you can't plan for the unknown. It's the unknown. You can't plan. So you don't just sit around and say, well, I don't know, I'll just see. So you can't plan, but you can prepare. So the difference between planning and preparing, it took me a while to kind of really see the difference. But planning would be, when the D minor chord comes in the song, I'm going to play this. That's planning, right? But preparing would be, for a D minor chord, let me just familiarize myself with this world of possibilities. And then, so that way in the moment, maybe you're improvising and it's not over a form and a D minor zone appears, you know, and you're like, I'm prepared to navigate this. But you couldn't have planned for it because you didn't even know it was going to be there.
Yeah.
You know, I think sports are the perfect analogy for this. Sports is just improvising nonstop.
Yeah.
You can call a play, but that's not good. You know, how often does right? So if
that's not going to win you a ring either.
Right. So if, you know, let me kind of go niche here. If Matthew Dellavedova is driving the lane, you know, I didn't want to go Kobe or anything.
No, that's perfect.
So Dellavedova is taking the ball up. If he plans that once I cross half court, I'm going to turn left, dribble 3 times, turn right, and I'm going to pull up from the top of the key.
There's no way Matthew Dellavedova is doing
No, but that planning is, of course, completely flawed because, you know, you get double teamed, this happens, some guy's open, you got to find the open man. So, but you can prepare. You could say, you know what? Kyrie's guarding me. I know his tendencies. He wants me to go left or whatever. So, okay, I'm going to take him up on that, right? But in that moment, maybe that's the one time he pushes you the other way. You're not just going to do the thing you plan and all this. So it's, you prepare, you do your homework, but really the only way to, you know, be in that moment is to free yourself of those things.
Yeah.
So to get back to it, the vacuum can be helpful if it's like the absolute foundational things and the really core things that you know wouldn't be used in that same way you're practicing.
That'd be like where the cutoff knob is and like where the resonance knob is. Like,
But no, like, okay, on this patch, where does it really open up and where does it start to, you know, like the real minutia of those things. Yeah.
Well, and that's, you know, it's almost like experimenting with intention to, you know, it's okay to kind of like fuck around, but fuck around with purpose. You know, like have some kind of thing where like, okay, these chords don't work in this range or like this patch, like, because that's the kind of small shit that, like you're saying, it kind of comes into play in the middle of the gig. It's like this thing matters, you know, and it's not something that I would have really shedded, but because I fucked around with it enough, like to the side, it kind of helped me out.
And that's relationship with your instrument.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is a short answer, and because I'm really curious. In your shed heyday, how much were you practicing?
So that would be college. I think I was never a great practicer. I'm not a very disciplined practicer.
You sound like it.
Thank you. But I'd be playing all day.
Okay.
So I think that the complete answer would be, okay, let's say I shedded for 2 hours on a given day, but I woke up, I had combo at school from 11 to 1, and then I had a couple hours, so maybe 1:30 to 3:30, it was just me working on something. So that's my quote unquote practice.
Sure.
And then at a gig, I had an hour and a half sound check and then played 3 sets at the local bar or something. So I played drums for 8 hours that day or 9 hours.
And that was just a common occurrence to where you were always
playing. If for me, 10 out of 10 times, I would choose playing with other people over practicing. So it's not that you don't have to practice.
Yeah.
But for me, there was always more value in playing with other people. Always.
What is your opinion of, so if that was the case, like, were you trying to practice specific things on the gig, like, or were you of the mindset of like, okay, when I'm playing, I want to be, this is prepared time. I'm going to do things I'm comfortable with. And then you would stretch elsewhere. Like, did you have situations where you were stretching on the gig?
Yeah. I was lucky because a lot of it was in college. I wasn't playing like professional gigs.
Sure.
I was just playing with my crew at school. And the whole thing was just egging each other on, trying new shit, going nuts, Yeah, just like stuff in the cracks, tempos that were uncomfortable. And it wasn't like, hey, let's work on this thing. It's just the more you play with other people, you're going to find those less comfortable things, whether it's a time signature, a tempo, a dynamic, things like that. And then you're as I'm playing, kind of by the end of the night, you're like, oh, now I know what I need to work on.
Yeah.
Because so much of it is like, raise your hand if you've ever like sat at your instrument and you don't know what to practice. It's like, okay, yeah. And then you just invent something.
Yeah.
Or you just got off your phone and you saw something on your YouTube and you're like, I should probably be able to do that, without any context or something.
Yeah.
So for me, just by playing with other people, every time I play music with other people, I'm realizing or remembering what I need to work on.
Were you ever a record yourself on the gig guy?
Sometimes, but not religiously.
It was more just like memory. Like
I do. There's great value in that, though. I've even I've proposed this idea, which is difficult to quantify. But I was wondering, say you only have 10 minutes to practice every day. Let's just say you're working on playing triplets in time. Okay, so as a drummer, I would just sit at the pad and put the metronome on and play triplets, right? But in doing that, as I'm playing, there's so much that my brain is dealing with. What muscles do I need? How's the sound? Is the consistency? I'm thinking so much that I wonder if what is of more value, practicing playing for those 10 minutes or playing for only 5 minutes and recording it and using the remaining 5 minutes to listen to what you just did. Because you can listen in a way when you're not playing, you can listen in a way that you simply can't listen while you're playing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I wonder, I kind of feel like option B is actually more productive.
Yeah.
You're playing less and you think, well, no, just play the whole time. But no, check it out. If you listen with as much intention as you had when you were playing, it's like you will find the ways that thing needs to be improved probably sooner than you would if you're just playing it.
Yeah, and I love that.
Let me say, I think.
Yeah.
Question mark.
I don't know. I think you're absolutely right. I think that's something too. Like with less quantifiable ways of practice, I think that's even more valuable. Like there's. Let's say I'm learning chords. Like I heard some Doobie Powell voicing that I really like. Like that thing. It's like once you have it, you have it. You don't necessarily need to record yourself knowing like, oh, I have this finger position everywhere. But, and I used to do a ton of this shit. And I think this is when I got the most improvement out of my practice career was like really doing some sort of time thing and like recording. If I did it for an hour, if I'm like looping a James Brown tune for an hour, like recording the first minute and recording the last minute. And like not only does it give you the analysis factor of like, like what do I need to work on here? But it's also, I think, the one way with that kind of practice where you can actually hear improvement. Because it's really, I mean, and tell me if you experience this too, but I found like rhythm study shit, it's hard to know if you're getting better because you don't gain like a thing. You're not gaining like here's a piece of knowledge I didn't have. It's like you're sharpening an edge to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think, again, it's such long game stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm still working on the same things I've been working on for 15 years, because every time I do them, I hear ways that they can be improved.
Sure.
There are some days I'll put the metronome on at 71 and I try to play triplets and I can't,
Yeah.
And it's like, what happened? And I was like, all right, I know what I need to work on.
Yeah.
Like really, you know? And even on the days that it feels great, it's like, okay, but what could I improve? The consistency, the balance, my breathing, all that stuff, And I find it really helpful to have a really trustworthy place to go inside of your practicing to check back in and hopefully maybe start to notice some improvement or even just changes in psychologically, like, wow, I don't know if I could quantify if my eighth notes are more in time, but I feel better when I'm playing them. And you can only do that if you keep revisiting,
That's true. Yeah.
And I find that, especially in like, I'm not sure what it's like for other instruments, but drum education, or at least when I was younger and taking lessons and stuff, it was very book based. And that was great for me. It was perfect because I needed that structure. But it's very much like, cool, for next week, do this page. And for next week, do this page. And that's great.
Yeah.
Really not knocking that at all. It's exactly what I needed. But psychologically, what that tends to create is as you turn that page to the next page, it implies that you're done with that thing. Mm-hmm. And of course you're not, so that's why if I'm on page 1 of my book, quote unquote.
Yeah.
I do have a book, but that's a separate topic. In my general, like, hey, who am I as a musician book, I'm on page 1 and I open it up to page 1 every day and check it out. Because there isn't even page 2.
Yeah.
There's nothing to turn to. This is it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's playing eighth notes, it's playing triplets, playing 16 notes, relax, get a good set. Like, why would what am I gonna, flip to after that? It's really, especially if you just keep reinventing that stuff and orchestrating it differently, it's endless.
I don't think I've made it past page 5 of Ted Reed's Syncopation for the Modern Drummer yet. I've had that book for, I think, 16 years now, and it's always like quarter note page, eighth note page, eighth notes and triplets. Like that's like on a wild day is eighth notes and triplets.
Mr. Reed, if you're listening, I'm sorry that you had to work so hard on those other pages.
The drills are great. I just haven't, I'm not good enough at page 2 yet to go on. I wanted to ask you about, I suppose I should start with a compliment and butter you up.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Was that the compliment?
Yeah, no, that's a compliment. You are married to one Miss Gretchen Parlato, and I think, both of you, before I even knew you were married, I was huge fans of both of yours. Back in Nebraska, I was constantly listening to her music around the house and like really just falling in love with her arrangements, everything, and also like getting my ass kicked by your recordings with Avishai, which I still give to students. I still been working on Pins and Kinsen for like 38 years now, and I'm only 35 years old. But
I call that womb practicing.
yeah. I'm sure my mom will love to know that I was altering her playlist from beyond. But you guys are the perfect example to me, and it's good for me to see like a musician couple who, you guys not only are, happy couple, have the great family thing going on, but you guys have also taken like it's like you each have unique pathways. And I'm curious, I'm always curious to know how those interact. And I think the main question would be like, do you ever find conflict is the wrong word here, but I'm going to use it because there's lack of a better option. Do you ever find conflict between your musician self and your husband self in terms of like how you interact with Gretchen's career or vice versa? Like, do you ever have to like find a line there and then set a hierarchy of like which one is which, which one should come first?
Not really. It's quite natural. I mean, I think, the reason relationships work is that you're with the right person,
sure.
Yeah. So I think like, we met through music and of course love each other's music and music is at the core of our family, but it's like, it's us.
Yeah.
That, it's very tempting to keep it inside music,
sure.
Mm-hmm. But of course it's much bigger than that. It's the way you choose to live and how you treat people and, world, just being a citizen in this world. And we align on that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we have very similar tastes musically. I think we're both open to, I think also like I respect the shit out of her.
Yeah.
And so it's like, as confident as I might be about a certain idea, it's like, well, like, what's your take?
You're because also a badass.
Yeah, like, and really, and that was cool. I was a fan of hers too before I met her. So it's like, wow, to have that view of someone and to even, be able to collaborate. And our brains are really different in the way our brains work. I think the results are similar, but the way they work are quite different. So I feel like we fill in a lot of gaps for each other.
That's killing.
Which is huge. Even as something as simple as like the way my brain works is like I'm weird and I like to like book flights and like worry about those details and how are we getting from A to B.
Which is out as fuck, by the way.
I mean, I don't like it. I'm happy to do it. I'd rather do it than to just have someone kind of wing it and be, so like, and that's not the way her brain works.
Yeah.
And so she might have, like, we're working on some of her new music today and it's like she could do the quote unquote academic thing if she really wanted, but she's so much more intuitive than I am, all by ear and all this stuff. So for me, that's not me. Yeah. I'm more X's and O's. So it's really cool to meet in the middle and see how that can work. So I feel like, we're lucky in the sense that we're like super aligned, but what's cool is we go at it at slightly different slightly different ways so that we can pick each other up where one is lacking or and vice versa.
Were there ever like conversations about like, okay, if this thing happens career-wise, here's how I would want you to approach it? Or do you just kind of like, has everything been like super organic and just based off of like, oh, I fucking love this person, like it'll figure itself out because I love this person?
Yeah, and yes, it's just figuring itself out. And I feel lucky that we kind of planted our feet in the ground, in each other's grounds independently before we even knew each other.
Yeah.
Kind of created an identity artistically. And so it's like, oh yeah, that's Gretchen. Yeah, Mark's doing this. Okay.
That's probably pretty great too, just because then you guys, it's like if you do come together, because you guys play together sometimes. It's not like super often, but I feel like those moments, because you guys have these kind of separate trajectories, it's like when you do play together, it's like, holy shit, this is a thing I don't like get to do a ton. And it's also not something I have to do. So it's like way more like, oh shit, this is amazing.
Totally. And it's super fun. And maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I do feel like lucky that we both did what we needed to do without realizing it before we got together so that we could be together.
Yeah. You guys been together how long?
We got married 6 years ago.
Okay.
We have a 5-year-old son. So for me, I'm 38. I wish I could have had him 10 years ago and I have a 10-year-old son. I was ready in my body. I was ready to be a dad or I wanted to be. But, you got to find the right person. So zero regrets about the timeline or anything. Just grateful that it even happened. You know?
Well, I'm going to thank Marley for letting me hold his spot in beat music, because he's probably going to start taking my gigs in about 4 or 5 years. He's already knows more about synthesis than some other cats in the scene, I think.
He does reach for some unexpected knobs. That's
exactly what you need to do.
I think he's.
I was going to mention Ace. I had an experience with you on the road that was very eye-opening and kind of made me dive deeper into some metaphysical shit. But I can't remember where we were at. I feel like it was a Spain thing, but we went out and did an encore, and I think we had said we're going to play. It was a spirit animal night, like when we started to get rowdy with all that. And you proceeded to wait until the audience stopped clapping, and then I think you took like 8 deep breaths. But and nothing phased you, and it was like, oh, this is really calming. Like there's about to be some sensitive shit happening, and then you played the most fucking like aggressive, intense fucking thing I've ever heard. Like I think I just started screaming at you in the middle of the drum solo, and I think we talked more as the tour went on just about your love of meditation, your interest in it. You've definitely shared some book ideas. Shout out to the Pima book. That thing was killing. Yeah. I'm curious about has this been something you've been doing for a long time, or was there like some sort of like specific event that prompted your meditation interest?
So I think meditation interest is more accurate than the practice itself. I admittedly, I wish I was more committed to the practice than I am, but the interest is all day, every day.
Yeah.
Like just that.
The physical feeling shit.
Yeah. Just that way of dealing with life, really meeting Gretchen was huge. She kind of has her 2 main influences in that world are Thich Nhat Hanh and Pema Chodron. So Thich Nhat Hanh is a Buddhist monk from Vietnam, and he's still alive. He's maybe 90. If someone wants to learn more about him, it's very easy to do so. But the short story is that he's quite often credited with kind of bringing mindfulness to the West.
Okay.
He was exiled from Vietnam when he was 20-something because he was opposing the war.
Shit.
And, Martin Luther King nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize in 60 whatever, 6 or something, Yeah. But just really simple language, really relatable language. And it's just like, to me, I have respect for anyone's beliefs, but to me it just feels like common sense stuff.
Yeah.
It's not very religious. And that's what Gretchen kind of also, I really like how she's very spiritual but not necessarily religious, Anyway, it's just the idea of being present. And I think again, as an improviser, like that's the ultimate pursuit.
Yeah.
And the ultimate goal is, how can I truly be present and try to make the best decision for this moment? Yeah, I think that idea of like, when you're in this moment, everything is okay in this moment. It really is. Even when it feels like it isn't. In this moment, you're surviving each moment. You're cool, right? Everything's cool.
Yeah.
It's the forecasting of what's about to happen. It's the looking back as to what you could have done differently. Obviously, so that in those moments you're leaving
anxiety
the
and
moment.
depression.
Yeah. But in that moment, you're cool. Even pain, like every moment you are surviving that pain.
Yeah.
You're cool in that moment.
Yeah.
You're dealing with it. But the forecasting of, wow, this is going to hurt so bad in 2 hours tomorrow. For 3 weeks, I'm in this. But like in each moment, you're okay.
Yeah.
So it's really, really difficult. Even these master meditators speak often about how difficult it is even for them, to stay in that moment. And really, the moment for me is getting back to what I love about my favorite art or music is like, it's from the gut. Like quite often, if you're suffering, Sam Harris said something, I don't want to see him. He's like, if you're suffering, you're thinking. Try to imagine a time that, even physical pain, it's the thought that makes it greater than even what it is. So quite often, if you're suffering, it's due to your thinking. So like, again, that kind of brain versus gut thing, like I think the real answers are, again, we need our brains, I guess, fine, but really to try to get through that and get to that place and really just being in the moment. It's a nice, at the very least, a nice exercise.
Well, and it's also something, like you get to a certain point of music where I think you may have even said this at some point, but it's like everyone can play. Like everybody can fucking play.
Come on, man.
Like in our scene, it's like literally, I think about even just, this last Corey run I was on, we were at some festival and I looked at like 10 bands. I'm like, wow, everybody in these bands is like a legend in some scene, and like I think the shit that, if you get into any kind of like success oriented competitive mindset, which isn't always healthy, but there's a part of that where it's like the top 1% of those people, it's like they've figured out how to transcend just the music part, and it comes back to the emotion thing too. But like, I mean, did you ever read Effortless Mastery, the Kenny Werner
Absolutely.
thing? There was
somewhere. There
was something, I feel like there was something him talking about in that book of like, make one of your practice sessions just playing like a B flat and just trying to like describe it to yourself, and that shit to me, it's like the better I feel like I get at music is because I've done more of that shit, which seems, again, on the outside, like you were just saying, it seems a little like, what the fuck are you talking about? But like, if you can really harness, like, what does this thing do to me? What does it make me feel like? What do I think it's doing to those people out there? If you're playing for someone, it's like, that's, man, the people who are killing right now, the people who are at the top of the game, the people who are legendary, it's like they found that, and it became more about a transcendent moment of like, what is this emotion? What is this feeling? What is the description of what I'm playing, rather than like, what's the chord, or like, how am I outlining this G triad? It's like, none of that ends up really mattering.
Well, it could, your commitment to that could, but it doesn't matter because of the theory of it. It's just maybe you cared so much about it and put so much energy into it that it matters, I think that's the other thing. This conversation is best when there's as much nuance as possible, because it's definitely not, man, it doesn't even matter what voicings you play. Because it's easy to jump there, but it is, like you said, the Herbie or the Train, it's the guys who can get to the other side of the stuff, where it's just in them and they're using it as tools, but yeah, it's everybody can play. It used to be like, oh cool, can he play? Like that's how I used to think, like, oh hey, you should meet this. Oh cool, yeah, he can play. Oh yeah. Oh man, cool. And now it's like everybody can play. So now what?
Yeah.
If you take that off the table, now what?
Yeah. Yeah.
I love dirt. I love grit, and sometimes we, in our pursuit of, excellence, we're like constantly shining it, it's like I'm removing that stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, I just love that edge. I love seeing somebody with like janky posture. I love seeing like, for a certain expression, they do this thing, which is just like, wait, why is your body doing that? And it's out of their own control.
That's why I love Will Lee so much. It's like you look at him, you're like, you're melting on stage. It's killing.
And I'm a fan of technique. I value it. I spend a lot of time on it. I love, say, a drummer with great technique, but like, you got to show me that there's other options too. Or I don't want to say it like that. I love when it's not just one way of playing.
Yeah.
You know,
this is the reason why I am violently in love with Jason Lindner. Because it's like, I know he has all this, and I'm moving my fingers in a jazzy kind of way, but it's like the more I see him play and the older he gets, I'm like, this dude is literally just willing to like lay on his keyboard and just turn a bunch of knobs, and like it puts you in a place. And it's not always the most pleasant place, but that's fucking amazing. Like,
but the intention is pure.
Yeah, it's just so like there's this just really like, oh, you're, like I was never a smalls guy because jazz has never really been like my super, super focus. But I just remember going there, I think once or twice up in New York, and like you see the lines of people waiting to sit in. It's like all these people getting up and playing like unbelievably virtuosic like chord outlines and all these things. And I just, the whole time I'm up there, it's like the one dude I'm paying attention to is the guy that looks like he had a really hard day. He's playing like quarter notes. Right. You're just like that dude got punched today.
You can
like
feel
I know
something.
I know it. And that's, like that's that you see that in the legends too, like a Hargrove. Like a Hargrove wasn't always playing a ton of heavy, like quick technique-y shit. I mean, he could, but like Miles too. Hi, Marley.
What's up, dude?
Marley has come to say hi. Can I have a high five? Yes. Hi.
What's up? We're just talking and we're recording it. You see the mics? You want to say anything?
Marley's here to give me my synth lesson today. We're working on specific high pass filter frequencies we're going to focus on.
I can show you the new house.
Yeah?
The new house? No, Nick has seen the house.
I mean, now I can show you my toys.
I'm definitely down to see those.
Let's do that. We're going to finish up and we'll come into the house. And then we'll definitely play. I'll bring the new keyboard. I'll bring the keyboard you like with the antenna, okay? Nick's really good at that one.
I'm actually really only good at keyboards that have antennas. So
yeah, it's kind of for your age, right? Where is it? It's over there.
Oh yeah, that's the infamous Jaws keyboard. Yeah. Are you gonna play me the Jaws theme song later? Because I can't remember how it goes.
Now I only know the first part.
That's right. That's the best part. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that part.
It's the sign of a good song where it's immediately identifiable.
This might be Marley's first on-air appearance. That's exactly how it goes. The phrasing game, so on point.
It's a proud dad moment.
This is actually a spooky one.
Whoa. That's like the 80s version, the late 80s version.
I like this one better.
That's good. Slight like
Marley, one question on Mike, and then we could go. Hey, what's that song you've been listening to where you really like the bass?
Scaly Monsters and Nice
Sprites.
Whose song is that?
Skrillex.
Yes. Shout out to Skrillex. And Lewis Cole is going to be throwing a party when he hears this.
It's Marley's really into the bass in that music because it sounds like robots, right?
No. It sounds like Gremlock.
Gremlock. What is Gremlock?
It's not actually a word. It's like a transformer that transforms into a T-Rex from a show.
Amazing.
Yep. So that's what we listen to at home sometimes.
That's so good. It's actually a really great record. Like sonically, like super on point.
2010.
Killing.
You know, if you really go back to then, try to put yourself then and listen. All right, but we're gonna finish up. We'll meet you inside.
Okay.
All right. We'll see you in there. Thanks for that.
Is that his first on-air performance?
I think so.
So good.
Maybe you could tidy that up to.
Yeah, well, that's
have a moment.
That's what we're paying the big bucks for.
Exactly.
That is so killing. Yeah, that Skrillex record that was actually a pretty big sonic influence of mine. We used to listen to that in Nebraska, and we were just amazed that like a dude and his laptop could make that sound.
Exactly.
Because it sounds like you mic'd like a room that had 8 computers in it.
It's interesting. A friend of mine was like best friends with his tour manager. So I went to see him a couple times and hung with him. He seemed like super mellow, like really kind of normal. And yeah, the live show, it's like, that's not really my scene, usually like the real party club thing, but to hear that music live and to have your ribs fucking shaking.
It's really, the light show is nuts.
Yeah,
I saw him in Omaha and it was
really, really
game-changing.
Like an experience.
Yeah. Well, the last really quick thing I wanted to bring up to you was I'm really big on getting people's advice for younger musicians, and we've touched on a lot, so I'm sure most of them will be happy. But I feel like there's always an answer for this, so I'm going to ask you what it is too. Like, what do you think the main thing that the younger cats on the scene should be paying attention to that maybe they aren't?
Music.
I feel yeah. You could add like 100 words to that, but I don't think it gets any more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to, but that is I think, to repeat myself a little bit, it's like all that matters is playing with other people. Even if it's maybe a musical situation that isn't quite home for you or something, I've always just grown from playing with other people. Mm-hmm. And that's how I discovered myself, or am continuing to learn more about myself, is through real life musical situations with other people. Sometimes you learn about what you don't want to do, but that is learning. Even just selfishly, that is the ultimate gift, is like sharing that experience with other people, sharing it with listeners, and you can only get so far on your own.
Sure. I feel like that is a good piece of advice to wrap up on. I will end by thanking you for I'm going to try and not put this cornily. Is that yeah. Just thank you for consistently being, about the music and changing the game, but doing so in a fashion that is both honest and about the music and not about just like a career. I feel like all the things you're doing are honestly trying to achieve some sort of artistic purpose. And I think a lot of people make decisions that only benefit themselves, and yours seems to be like kind of a here's a thing for the world, and the world appreciates it. Right. So thank you so much. We'll chat again soon. Keep an eye out actually go pick up Mark's beat music record that came out in April. Come see us play. We have a few runs coming up that I think I'm playing on. So I will do my best to keep up, and thanks a ton.
I imagine if anyone's listening to this, they've heard you play music, but you're good at it, and thanks for having me.
Hell yeah. We'll do some fade outy stuff. Well, that's it for this month's episode, and a big thank you again to Spectrasonics for being the new official sponsor of the Grid Kids podcast. Head on over not only to their website, spectrasonics.net, but also check out my Instagram page at Nicholas T. Semrad this week for a clip of me using their Keyscape program and the piano samples within. The amount of editing you can do extremely easily to these piano sounds is perfect for me, as I've become obsessed with pianos that have short releases and dark vibes. So thanks everyone, and see you next time here at the Grid Kids Podcast.